I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story. All the ways to communicate with us right there at the bottom of your screen. You can email us. The address is thestory@kgw.com, or you can use the hashtag TheStoryKGW on Twitter, or just leave us a voicemail. Call our phone number, 503-226-5090. One month from tonight, something very big is going to be happening in Eugene. The World Track and Field Championships will be underway with an estimated 2,000 athletes from 200 countries. It's going to be the best of the best in track and field, their biggest event outside of the Olympics. And it will mean an infusion of money to Oregon and a worldwide showcase for the state.
The incredible Hayward Field in Eugene will host the World Athletics Championships. It's widely considered the best track and field stadium in America. Sarah Massey is the CEO of the organizing group called Oregon 22.
Things are being built already in Hayward Field. People can see the construction starting for the World Championship overlay and infrastructure. We've got our team on board. We've been recruiting heavily in the last few weeks and months, but we have a great, really strong team on board ready to deliver.
The championships will run from July 15th through the 24th. It will be the first time they've ever been held in America. I had a chance to talk with Governor Kate Brown about it. She supported the effort to land the event along with then Governor John Kitzhaber.
How did Oregon land this thing?
That is a great question, but I have to believe it all revolves around Hayward Field. The magic and the history of Hayward Field. This is truly where track and field started. It is the heart and soul of track and field across the United States.
Fair, but it was a lot more than that. The Oregonians' Ken Go reported it began back in 2011 with Vin Lanana. He was the legendary track coach at the University of Oregon and president of Eugene's Tracktown USA Organizing Committee. In 2014, Go reports, Lanana put together a proposal to hold the games in Eugene in 2019 and lobbied the federation responsible for deciding where the event would be held. But the federation decided to instead give the games that year to the Persian Gulf city of Doha. But it was clear they wanted to bring the championships to America. Go reports that Lanana was not deterred and in 2015 flew to China to again lobby the federation. It worked. With no formal bid process, Eugene landed the World Championships for 2021, which was moved to 2022 when the Olympics were delayed by COVID. Now, 7 years later, it's almost time. Oregon tourism leaders, including Todd Davison, the CEO of Travel Oregon, are thrilled.
The impact of the World Athletic Championships really cannot be overstated. This is the most prestigious track and field event that happens in the world. It's one of the largest sporting events that happens on a global stage. It's perhaps only surpassed by the Olympics and World Cup soccer.
Davidson said direct spending by athletes and teams and fans could range from $50 million to $200 million. He expects hotel rooms will be hard to find.
But yeah, we expect rooms to be purchased from Portland to Roseburg and east and west from Eugene, as far west as Florence and up the McKenzie corridor as well.
The effort to host the games will take 2,500 volunteers. Most are already signed up. The athletes will include Olympians, world record holders, and others who are the best in their sport. NBC will broadcast the event over 43 hours, including the first 2 days and the last 2 days in prime time on NBC.
We don't know.
It's an opportunity the governor and many in Oregon look forward to.
More importantly, I expect 1 billion people to be watching these games. It's amazing opportunity for the rest of the world to see Oregon.
And probably a chance for Oregon to rebrand itself or remind people that it's a safe place that doesn't have riots every night?
Right, absolutely. That it's an amazing place for tourism, that we've got incredible beauty and bounty, 363 miles of Oregon coastline that's publicly accessible.
And I'm told that there are still tickets available. If you want to go, you can just check it out on their website. Also, Vin Lanana, who helped get this whole thing going, he now lives on the East Coast, and interestingly, he's not going to be involved in these games when they are here. All right, we love to talk about solutions on this show, but when it comes to Portland's homeless crisis, there has not been a lot of solution to talk about. Well, tonight we're going to highlight something that's worked across the country in Houston, Texas. The New York Times has a story that we think is worth your time. In the past decade, Houston has moved 25,000 people off the streets and into permanent housing. And they've done that with what's called a housing first policy. Now, we use that term around here too, but the outcome is a much different story. In Houston, it means they don't just sweep homeless camps and wait for those people to move somewhere else and then clear them out again. In Houston, they go into the camps and offer people permanent housing in one-bedroom apartments with no requirement for being clean or sober. The city then works with nonprofits to continuously offer services like drug and mental health treatment to the people who've moved into that housing. Now, I know you may be thinking we are comparing apples and oranges here. Portland and Houston are two very different cities. The most obvious difference is Houston is much larger than Portland. Okay, that's true, but I want to show you some numbers that help put things into perspective. This is a look at the number of homeless people per capita in both cities. In 2011, Multnomah County had a rate of 23 homeless per 10,000 people. The rate for Harris County, Texas, where Houston is located, was similar, 21 homeless per 10,000 people. But in the decades since, Houston has implemented its housing first policy, and Harris County's per capita rate has dropped to just 7 homeless per 10,000 people. On the other hand, Multnomah County's rate has nearly tripled to 63 homeless per 10,000 people. Again, I know there's still a lot of difference between the two cities, but it's possible that Portland could learn a thing or two from Houston's program. Our sister station KHOU sat down with Houston's Mayor Sylvester Turner this week to talk about how the city made this work.
I think what is noticeable is that 2 years after the fact, most of those people are still housed. And that's because of the permanent wraparound services. Because in many cases, we don't wait for people to get themselves clean or stabilized, so to speak. So if there are persons, for example, substance abuse, you don't go and get yourself detoxed and all of that, and then you qualify. Or if you're suffering from mental behavioral health issues, it's not like you go and get the treatments and you stabilize and then you are housed. We kind of do things all at the same time. We get you off the streets, we get you in an apartment, and at the same time, we provide the wraparound services all at the same time. We are not abandoning them. We are not putting them in an apartment and then walking away from them. We are putting them in an apartment, but we come along with them. We come with the services that they need, whether they're mental health services, substance abuse services, they need assistance with training, they need to be able to navigate to where the services are. So all the groups, the nonprofits come along with them.
All right, but what about people who don't want to move out of the camps? Well, the mayor says a big reason this program has been so successful is that outreach workers are very persistent. They don't just approach someone once and then walk away if they say they don't want to move. They might revisit 5, 6, 7 times to convince them. The mayor told a story about helping get one man into housing.
We went back and forth. And the first objection he made is, look, the shelters don't allow pets. We said, we can address that. You can take your pet. And then he said, there are various curfews and there are restrictions. They don't particularly like restrictions at shelters. So we said, okay, we can address, we're talking about putting you in your own apartment, your own unit, okay? And then they said, well, then there was a great deal of distrust. You're just trying to fool us. And then we came back and said, why don't you allow us, we'll take you, your pet, whatever belongings you want, we'll take you to your place, and then if you don't like it, we'll bring you back. And it was at that point that the person said yes, and the person was effectively housed.
Well, that sounds pretty good. The mayor says Houston has not solved everything, though. There are still people living on the streets and in camps, but they've made huge progress in the past 10 years. He says their biggest challenge right now is finding enough available one-bedroom apartments. Sound familiar? Also a huge problem in Portland. In fact, Multnomah County has started offering incentives to landlords who will rent vacant units to homeless people. Houston's mayor says they are also working with landlords in a similar way. So the big question is, would Houston's homeless crisis solution work in Portland? Well, we asked Mayor Ted Wheeler and all the city commissioners what they think of that plan. So far, only Joanne Hardesty has responded. In a statement, she says she would like to see Portland focus on solutions like Houston's. She also wrote in part, "I also want to see more measurable outcomes included in Portland's intergovernmental agreement with Multnomah County to ensure that we are seeing results with taxpayer dollars." She continued, "It's important to note that Houston has significant federal funding to support this effort, and Portland will need that support to solve this crisis as well." Listen to what Houston's mayor says about how the city was able to get the system up and running in the first place.
They started the Houston Homeless Coalition, and that's pulling together, establishing, I would call the ecosystem for housing the homeless. That's that network of pulling together all the different providers, the nonprofits, and getting them all under the same umbrella where people are working together and not at odds with one another, where it wasn't in silos, but everybody was moving in the same direction.
Did you hear him say silos? Oh, we know all about silos here. That might be one of the keys for Portland. As we've told you, Portland's current form of government is, well, let's just be nice and call it dysfunctional, in no small part because of silos within the city government. We have 4 city commissioners elected citywide plus the mayor. The mayor then assigns them departments or bureaus to run for the city. This has led to silos where commissioners look out for what's best for their team, but not for the city as a whole. The only big thing the mayor can do to try and fix that is to take the bureau away and assign it to himself, but he can only run so many bureaus without getting swamped. Well, recently, Mayor Ted Wheeler announced a plan to bypass some of that to address the homeless crisis. He created a new office to centralize the city's homeless services instead of having them spread out amongst different bureaus. But that doesn't address the root of the problem, which is how Portland's government functions. However, last night, the Portland Charter Commission did approve a proposal for a new form of government. And now that's going to the ballot in November, so you Portland voters can decide whether you want to do it or not. Here's what would change. The city council would expand from 4 seats to 12. The city would be divided into 4 parts, and 3 commissioners would be elected from each part of the city. Those elections would be held using something called ranked choice voting. That's a system where you vote for multiple candidates. You pick the candidate you want the most, and then you pick the second most, and then the third most, and so on. Also, the mayor would still be elected citywide, but they would not vote with the council unless there's a tie, and then the mayor would step in and vote to break the tie. The mayor would be in charge of actually running the city with the help of a professional city manager. The hope is that that would finally get rid of the silo problem. Last night, we asked you what you think about that idea. Here's some of your emails. Greg wrote, "I think it's unnecessarily complicated, but anything is better than the mess that we have now, so I'll vote yes." Larry simply said, "I like this idea so far, but some of you do have concerns." Randy wrote, 12 commissioners? The meeting time will triple. Yeah, probably. And Mike said, "It seems ridiculous to vote on a proposal to expand the number of commissioners in Portland with no definite figure on the cost." Well, as we told you last night, another commission will be determining everyone's salaries, but that group has not yet been formed and probably will not be formed until voters either pass the change or reject it. When the story continues, if you thought the NEWBERG School Board saga was over, think again.
I find I can no longer work with people who I feel do not have the best interest of every student and every staff member at heart.
2 members of the board just resigned, leaving only those who voted for that ban on Black Lives Matter signs and pride flags in the classrooms. That story coming up next. Welcome back. Keep sending your questions and comments to thestory@kgw.com. I see there's some of you already emailing us about that Houston story. We love it when you ask us questions, when you have story ideas, suggestions. Keep it coming. Thank you very much. You can also call and leave us a voicemail, by the way. The phone number is 503-226-5090. Here's a question. Should public schools focus on academics only, things like reading and writing, or are they responsible for more? That question has been tackled in Newberg over the last year, and it does not appear anywhere that there is an end in sight. Last night, 2 members of the school board resigned, saying they could no longer deal with the board's conservative majority. The controversy started about a year ago, but the school board's conservative majority proposed a ban on Pride and Black Lives Matter flags. They later expanded that to include anything they called a political symbol. They said they wanted the schools to focus on academics only without distractions. But opponents said the ban specifically targeted students of color and LGBTQ students who face greater danger of bullying and mental health concerns in schools. Then the board fired the district superintendent without cause. This all happened while Newberg was making national headlines for racist incidents in the school, including an online virtual slave trade on Snapchat that students put together and pretended to auction off black classmates, and a staff member who showed up for work in blackface. In turn, a group tried to recall the board's conservative chair and vice chair, but a majority of voters said no, and they kept their jobs. Earlier this year, one of the Liberal board members, Ines Pena, resigned, saying the board had become a toxic work environment. And last night at the board meeting, the 2 remaining Liberal board members also quit, starting with Rebecca Pyros.
The board's actions and decisions this past year has broken my heart, and therefore I'm submitting my resignation from the Newberg School Board tonight. I find I can no longer work with people who I feel do not have the best interest of every student and every staff member at heart. It has been my deepest privilege and honor to serve the community of Newberg and Dundee for the past 20 years.
Pyros promised to find ways to support students in the future. Right after Pyros resigned, school board member Brandy Penner also announced she was leaving the board.
While words like transparency, parental voice, and fiscal conservatism came from the board, actions like name-calling, homophobic slurs, rampant abuse of power, and disregard for public meeting laws and tax dollars are happening. I'm a survivor of domestic violence, and what I have experienced on this board for the last 3 years has brought back far too many personal memories of abuse. Colleagues telling me that their atrocious and abusive behavior was in fact my fault, that the name calling, the sexism, and the outright disrespect were my fault because I refused to break the law and let students and educators suffer open harassment and discrimination. No one deserves to be treated poorly, called names, laughed at, and disregarded.
We talked with Penner today. She said she and Pyros had been planning together to resign from the board, but they wanted to get through the school year first. She said they reached a point, though, where they couldn't get anything done with the board members at odds with each other. She said the 2 sides of the board have a fundamental disagreement over the role schools play in a community.
That they didn't feel that the school was a place to support students. It was supposed to be only academic. That's terrifying. Things like system based solely on merit. So either you succeed or you don't, and it's not the school's place to support them or offer emotional supports or mental health supports. So my fear is that those are the things that they will go after next. And it is heartless. It is absolutely heartless to know that we have students who rely on those adults in those classrooms and in those schools to offer, counseling, social services, nutrition. There's so many things. And to know that they would purposely go after and try to get those services taken away from the most neediest kids, it's unconscionable.
She said the school board has been a place where she has been bullied.
There was a heated disagreement at one point, and I was called a spoiled brat. I was called a liar. I was dismissed as not knowing what I was talking about, that I shouldn't be there. Nobody wanted to sit next to me. Nobody liked me.
For now, Penner says she can be more effective advocating for students away from the school board. We reached out to the school board chair, Dave Brown, one of the members of the conservative majority who survived the recall attempt. He did not respond to our request for comment. But we did hear from a parent who said she gets why Penner and Pyros stepped down.
I understood right away. I feel so deeply for them, how much they went through in the last year, knowing that nothing they could ever say, nothing that they could ever do or the way they could vote would ever matter because the school board majority was not interested in working with them. You know, they clearly have an agenda. They're moving forward, and it kind of makes the other people on the board, you know, sort of useless. And so why would I couldn't imagine myself returning to an environment as a volunteer over and over again, only to be interrupted, silenced, made fun of, laughed at, argued with.
It's now up to the remaining board members to appoint replacements for Penner and Pyros until the election, which is next May. Still ahead, have you ever wondered what the X in PDX stands for? We'll explore how Portland International Airport got its name when the story continues. Time for another edition of What's in a Name? Sounds like a game show, doesn't it? But it's actually a great series of reports where Devin Haskins explains how local places got their name, everything from small towns to big city streets. Tonight, Devin takes us to Portland International Airport, also known as PDX, to explain where that X comes from.
Name an airport where it's more common to take a photo of your feet than it is of your face. That place is none other than Oregon's very own Portland International Airport. Today, it sits along the Columbia River in northeast Portland, but its beginnings start back in the 1920s. Retired Portland State Urban Studies professor Carl Abbott.
This is a time when people are beginning to think about the possibilities of commercial aviation.
Portland, wanting a municipal airport of its own, set their eyes on Swan Island.
Originally was an island until the 1920s. When river was dredged and a lot of the dredge spoils were heaped up onto Swan Island to flatten it out and connect it to the east side of the river.
On September 14th, 1927, the Swan Island Airport was open for business. It even brought about a famous face. That man, well, that's noted aviator Charles Lindbergh. Fresh off his trip across the Atlantic, he and his plane, the Spirit of St. Louis, touched down in front of a crowd of people.
According to the newspapers, he landed as light as a feather.
By the mid-1930s, the airport quickly outgrew its spot on Swan Island and moved to its current location, opening on October 13th, 1940.
It opened as Portland Columbia Airport.
Then in 1948, facilities were needed to handle international airline operations.
That's Oregon Governor Robert Holmes speaking during a 1958 dedication of an expansion at the airport, happening only a few short years after the airport had changed its name once again. Officially, it's now known as Portland International Airport. Many know it as simply PDX. Those three letters aren't random, they're actually assigned by the International Air Transport Association. The P is easy, the D, well, that's just the end of Portland. But the X?
The X is just, it's a placeholder.
That's not a joke. In the late 1940s, the IATA started assigning three-letter codes after an increase in airports popped up, leading to a shortage of two-letter codes. So, taking the National Weather Service symbol of PD, it added an X. Portland became PDX. A couple other airports also added the X. Phoenix went from PH to PHX. Los Angeles went from LA to LAX. So next time you claim your bags with the tag reading PDX, now you know that's what's in a name.
For this week's Hey Help campaign, we're asking you to donate to our Giving Table. It's a Portland-based nonprofit that makes sure that foster kids and underprivileged children get enough to eat. They do a lot of work in the summer when the kids can't eat breakfast or lunch at school every day. If you want to help out, just hold up your phone's camera to the QR code there on your screen, or you can go to kgw.com/heyhelp. Well, that's the end of our program. Thanks for watching the show. Remember, the story, our story, well, that never ends. I'll see you tomorrow.